Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center Sunday morning program on this beautiful first Sunday in autumn. We are recording this program and it will be posted on the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center website and various social media. We will begin the program with devotions, after which time we will introduce our speaker.
Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me, find me. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me, find me. I am the sun of perception, the ocean of science. I revive the withered ones and quicken the dead. I am that light which illumines the path of insight. I am the falcon on the head of the Almighty. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring to the heaven of truth. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me, find me. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me, find me. I am the sun of perception, the ocean of science. I revive the withered ones and quicken the dead. I am that light which illumines the path of insight. I am the falcon on the head of the Almighty. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring to the heaven of truth. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring to the heaven of truth. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me, find me. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me, find me, find me. clouds do not weep. The meadows will not laugh if the clouds do not weep. The meadows will not laugh. This is the rainy season. If the clouds do not weep, the meadows will not laugh. If the clouds do not weep, the meadows will not laugh. If the rain does not pour down, if the wind does not blow.
Blessed is the spot. Nitara. Ai luogo. Sai chance. Y el corazón. Radio Baha'i. Googly the moon. Kau kakwa. Radio Patika. Hey kid. And a man. And the island. Where mention of God has been made and His praise glorified.
That concludes our devotions for this morning, and all of those devotions are available on YouTube and are from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha. At this time, I'd like to remind everyone that we are being recorded. You have been muted to reduce audio feedback, but our speaker is going to ask people to read, and you will be able to unmute yourself to read. We would also like to ask people to enable their cameras so that the speaker can see you and receive feedback from your lovely faces. Our speaker today is Dr. Sohrab Kourosh from Texas. We're very grateful to have him, and he will be speaking about environmental justice. Dr. Kourosh is Vice President and Senior Environmental Scientist of an environmental consulting engineering company, and was previously on the faculty of the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. He has authored and published books and articles on Baha'i subjects, papers in engineering and medical journals, and has lectured internationally at scientific and Baha'i conferences. He has a diverse educational background, including a BS and MS in mechanical engineering, an MA in psychology, an MS in aerospace engineering, a PhD in biomedical engineering, and a Juris Doctorate in environmental law. Today, his talk will present a new understanding on the vision of justice and how this relates to the environmental effects we are witnessing in the world. He will speak on the environmental hazards and the destruction caused by the fires in the western US, the hurricanes in the south and the east, and why all of this matters in the spiritual perception of the term environmental justice. Justice in the dictionary is defined as having a moral and ideal rightness, the quality of being fair, reasonable, and determining a just conduct. However, Dr. Kourosh will look through a spiritual lens on the definition of justice in the environment from a Baha'i perspective. He will guide us through the present global environmental conditions, speaking of the most important elements of social justice as the main goals and objectives of the Baha'i faith. Please help us welcome Dr. Sohrab Kourosh.
Good morning, friends. I'm so happy to be here with you this morning and see the beautiful faces of the friends from far and near. And this is really a good reward for being here to see all the beautiful faces of the friends. And I send my greetings to all of you. We're going to discuss the subject of environmental justice. And in these days that fiercely destructive fires and horrendous hurricanes are taking tremendous toll of life and property, and cries in demand of justice are raised not only in this nation, but all around the world by a strange turn of events. These two terms, the environment and justice, have come together. One might ask that what does environment, which in ecological terms is defined as the air, water, minerals, living organisms, and other aspects of the natural world, has to do with justice, that in dictionary is defined as principle of moral and ideal rights, the quality of being fair and reasonable, and moral principles determining just conduct. But however, if we look at the concept of environment and the definition of justice in Baha'i writings and the present global environmental condition, this connection will become clear, and it will become one of the most important elements of social justice. Social justice is defined by National Association of Social Workers as the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. But you will see that in this definition, a very important element is missing, and that is environmental rights. The establishment of the social justice is one of the goals and objectives of the Baha'i faith. Strangely enough, the cause of both problems in environmental problems and the social justice problems, as we can see, will be connected very strongly to environmental justice. The interest in ecology and concern for environment are a mid to late 20th century phenomenon. Before the middle of the 20th century, the primary interest of the most individuals, groups, or nations was in acquiring and exploiting natural resources and producing goods or industrial products without any concern for environmental consequences. The settlers of the Americas in 17th, 18th, and even 19th century generally paid little attention to environmentalism or to the conservation of natural resources. The 20th century began with a speedy growth and advancement of science. The application of science in production, which is called technology, uh, gained tremendous momentum in the middle of the 20th century. The speed of application of knowledge increased day by day. It took about half a century for the telephone, from the invention of telephone to the commercial use of application of telephone. But it took only 10 years from the time that radar was invented, when it was put in application during the Second World War. It took only 5 years from the time transistor was invented until it was commercially produced. And after the integrated circuit was invented, it took just a few months before it was commercially produced. So we see that application of the science in production, which is technology, was speeding up and progressing very fast. However, this expansion of production and technological development was often accompanied by a deficiency in knowledge of the effects of the new technology on human health and the environment. And a complete range of consequences were not known. In the words of James Stanovich, the former executive secretary of the Economic Commission for Europe, we behaved like a sorcerer's apprentice who did not know the whole trick, but learned just a little from his master, and with this little unleashed a tremendous chain reaction whose end he did not see. We one-sidedly apply technologies which break the natural cycles without knowing really where the end of this avalanche is. The application of some of these technologies brought about unintended results. Many examples exist in both industry and agriculture. The use of chlorofluorocarbon compounds, CFCs, in industrial production and the application of certain chemicals such as DDT in agriculture are both two publicized examples of this situation. In industrialized Western countries, the specialization, production efficiency, and automation were the objectives of industrial management. In the decades following the Second World War, material goods became relatively abundant for many people. And with this abundancy came the emergence of consumer industries with emphasis on mass production, increased manufacturing and production efficiency, and but with little concern for waste production or waste management. As a result, there was a great increase in volume and variety of pollutants released into the environment, including toxic and hazardous chemicals. The Green Revolution and capital-intensive agriculture are also examples of activities that offer progress in one area, but inflict heavy damage to the environment. As Stanley said, we pour plenty of fertilizers and pesticides onto the land, but these fertilizers and pesticides get washed away by water from the land, enter into the rivers and lakes, and eutrophication starts in the lakes, and all the waters become rotten. This has already been experienced in Europe and to a large extent in America. In the late 1960s, a new social force emerged which came to be known as environmentalism. There was a new emphasis on the quality of life. Advances were also made in emerging science of ecology. Uh, the study of interrelationship of the living things and natural world, although the word ecology, uh, which is coming from the Greek oikos, meaning house or place to live, was coined by German biologist Ernst Haeckel in 1869. The emergence of the science of ecology as a distinct field of biology is quite recent, and the word ecology, which seems so familiar today, it was invented in 1869, did not enter the general vocabulary of science, society and scientific use until 1960s. At about this time also, the word environment, which also in ecological sense uh, was coined in the ecological sense to mean the air, water, mineral, living organisms, and other aspects of natural world. But before the late 1960s, the word environment had a more neutral meaning, referring to the aggregate of surrounding things, conditions, or milieu. In the same period, new problems of global dimension, such as worldwide climate change, acid rain, toxic and hazardous waste, transboundary pollutions, and contaminations contamination of underground water sources, and came to be added to the existing problems. Dennis Hayes stated the following. He said that most of the fundamental problems of 1970s still plague us. Moreover, we now face a huge array of new and complex and seemingly intractable ills. Greenhouse gases heat up the atmosphere. The ozone layer becomes thinner. Deserts expand. Rainforests shrink. Oil uses skyrocket. Agricultural pests become resistant to modern chemistry. Garbage barges navigate the world's oceans, searching in vain for a welcoming harbor. Beaches clogged with styrofoam and lethal medical waste. Aquifers fall ever lower, and the groundwater is full of industrial waste. Endangered species disappear at the rate of 1 per hour. Human population explode while the urban slums implode. For decades, neighbors, cities, and nations used natural resources as if they were inexhaustible and throw waste away in a manner that said out of sight, out of existence. But soon afterwards, the communities, cities, and the nations started to feel the boomerang effect of their own health and environment. This was the time that the tragedy of the commons came to the notice. The tragedy of commons in the form of both resource depletion and waste disposal became a reality. The tragedy of common, as presented by Garrett Hardin, develops like this. Picture a pasture in a village, open to all. It is expected that each herdsman in that village will try to keep as many cattle as possible on these commons. Such an arrangement may work reasonably satisfactory for centuries or for a long time because tribal wars, poaching, and disease keep the numbers of both the animals and the humans well below the carrying capacity of the land. Finally, if by developments or turn of events, some stability is gained and the social stability becomes a reality, and also some medical advances prolong life and increase population, and there will be more herdsmen in the village as well. At this point, the inherent logic of the commons remorselessly generates a tragedy. In that point, every rational herdsman thinks that if he adds one or more animal to his herd to graze in that pasture or in the commons, he will, by selling those animals, he will gain more profit. So he will do that. And at the end of the process, if he sells the animal, he will get the whole proceeds for one more animal that he added, but the rest of the commons and rest of herdsmen will lose a fraction of that one. So it might be unnoticed and it will go ahead, and he will add one and one and one more and more to his herds. And also at the same time, all the other herdsmen will do the same. So very soon, the number of animals that graze and use the natural resource and the waste that they dispose on that common causes that common to be destroyed. So that is the tragedy that is called the tragedy of the commons. Although adding together the components of positive utilities, the rational herdsmen conclude that the sensible course of event is going to add more animals to graze on the common. But there is a tragedy that each man is locked into a system that compels him to increase his herd without limit in the world that is limited. Ruin is the destination towards which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest in a society that believes in the freedom of commons. Freedom in the commons brings the ruin to all. So the tragedy applies both sides, the resource depletion and also the dumping of the waste in the natural environment that causes that natural environment, is common, to be destroyed. Also, the advances of the science in general and the ecology in particular in recent years has shown that the Earth is a very large and complex ecological system. So if we look at the Earth as a spaceship, the Earth is this complex ecological system forms a sustainable life system so long as the ecological subsystems are not disturbed. The concept of life sustaining ecological process resulted in idea of spaceship Earth. NASA has a mission to Mars that has been on drawing board since 1975. This journey of 5 astronauts will take between 3 to 5 years. In the past 4 decades, they solved the problem of the interplanetary trajectory and voyage, problems of parking orbit, and controlled descent on Mars. So these were the problems, technological problems and system problems that they, during the past 40 years, they solved and overcame. But The main difficulty will be the creation of a life-sustaining ecosystem aboard the spaceship that can replenish its natural resources, for example, oxygen, water, and food, and treatment and recycling of the waste for the duration of the trip. In much the same way, the Earth is also a spaceship that requires a functioning, life-sustaining ecosystem. Tragedy of the commons and disregard for the ecology and disturbance of the ecological systems are the result of uncontrolled materialism, greed, and short-sighted profiteering. Since environmental problems such as air pollution, water pollution, and toxic waste pollution do not recognize boundaries. The radioactive, for example, the radioactive pollutions from 1986 Chernobyl event and the 2011 Fukushima disasters are still lingering in Earth, oceans, and atmosphere. So in this connection, the air, the water, the land are the global commons that we all have. We have also disturbed the spaceship Earth's ecology, and we are starting to experience the tragedy of commons in the form of a colossal fires that we are seeing is burning our areas on the west, devastating hurricanes and typhoons that not only in this country, all over the world, are increasing their strength and the numbers, and biological and health disasters. For example, some time ago, a group of children were born without brain in the industrial zone of between the border of US and Mexico. And when they investigated, they found out that the waste that the industrial production of the waste that was deposited in the agricultural land around that area was transferred to the human system and caused these deficiencies in children. Also, some scientists think that pandemics like Ebola and COVID-19 are diseases that jump from animals to humans due to disturbance of their natural habitats. During the past 50 years, public awareness regarding the importance of environmental issues was continuously increased, and environmental movements became powerful socio-political forces. This awareness was partly due to books, publications like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring that dramatically called attention to the impact of pollution on the natural world, and partly due to governmental legislative initiatives for protection of the environment. Many environmental regulations came to existence during this period. The concept of clean and controlled environment and a desirable living condition, when considered in the context of social justice, gave rise to the concepts of environmental rights, meaning that every human being is entitled to live in a clean, safe, and controlled environment. The environmental issues were recognized as social issues. Environmental rights were considered as an integral part of the social rights. And another form of environmental activism in the context of socio-environmental rights emerged. It has become very clear by now that most important problems whether nationally or internationally, are due to environmental injustice. The industrial conglomerates and large-scale agribusiness companies unproportioned overuse of the natural resources and dumping of pollutants and waste without regards to the adverse effects of their activities on the local and global ecology and environment results in depriving the generality of people from their environmental rights. Uh, that environmental rights, that means every human being is entitled to live in a clean, safe, and controlled environment. Here in US, since the passage of Civil Rights Acts of 1964, and parallel to the development of the concept of social justice, the minorities and people of color who were in pursuit of social justice became aware of their deprivation in the area of environmental rights. The concept of environmental justice and its related concepts such as environmental rights, environmental discrimination, and environmental racism have been coined and defined. Several environmental and grassroots community action groups through multimedia publicity brought the public attention to the environmental problems facing disadvantaged communities. A study by the General Accounting Office showed that 75% of the hazardous waste sites investigated in southern United States were located in minority, primarily African American communities. The unequal distribution of costs and benefits associated with environmental regulations brought the notion of environmental discrimination and environmental racism to the arena of public debate. There is a lot to be said on this subject, but due to our tight schedule, I will leave it for another time if there was an interest to go through this. In spite of all efforts by environmentalists, several international conferences, conventions, and summits, United Nations accords, programs, and protocols, and legal actions during the past 50 years, the same environmental problems of 60s and 70s are persisting. You remember that there were a lot of environmental conferences and protocols. We remember the Kyoto conference and also the Paris Accord, the most recent one, are very famous. And interestingly, US did not join none of them. And all these conferences gathering came together, but they were not able to implement any program that had action in it and had enforcement. So in spite of all these conferences and conventions and scientists and environmentalists trying, we right now see that the problems persist. And as mentioned before, a huge array of new complex and seemingly intractable ills like greenhouse gases that heat up the atmosphere and ozone layer being thinner every day is existing and is continuing to endanger the human population, as the human population is also explode. And in the same period of time, the environmentalist NGOs, foundations, and governmental organizations and international forums, the ecologists and biologists and scientists of every discipline have published volumes of materials and documents to explain their present position and their vision of future regarding the global environmental issues. A review of these documents show that while the ideas and objectives of these organizations are diverse, their response in addressing the environmental issues contains similar elements and common trends. These can be condensed in this following the statements, which I ask if friends can help me to read these so that I don't talk too much. Can someone read this one?
The present global environmental and ecological issues, such as worldwide climate change, greenhouse effects, and ozone layer depletion, acid rain, toxic and hazardous wastes, transboundary pollution, contamination of underground water, aquifers and drinking water supplies, and any other problem which might emerge in the future, are of utmost importance to humanity as a whole, and they require serious and urgent attention.
Yes, and also they say the roots and the nature of the environmental, social, and economical problems are the same. They are different aspects of the same problem and same phenomenon. Also, another issue is, can somebody read this, please?
Every human being is endowed, among other unalienable human rights, with the environmental right, meaning that every human being is entitled to live in a clean, safe, and controlled environment.
Thank you. And this one?
Indivisibility of nature does not allow partitioning of the environment. An environmental problem in one place will impact the environment in every part of the world. Therefore, environmental problems must receive priority among other global issues.
And then also they say, somebody can read this.
Global problems and issues need global monitoring and control, as well as global solutions. Therefore, the environmental monitoring and control should be globally performed, applied, and implemented.
Okay. They also conclude that, can someone read this?
Global monitoring and control require a global authority that can overcome the obstacles and override the claims of national sovereignty and penetrate borders.
Yeah, one of the reasons that most of the environmental accords and international conferences were not successful in doing anything really effective was that all the nations claimed that they have national sovereignty, so they did not allow any investigation or testing or control of their environmental issues by an international body. Also, could someone read this, please?
The tragedy of the commons in the forms of depletion of natural resources and ecological disasters, as well as waste generations, the preservation of the spaceship Earth, and the common heritage of the human race requires a global system of control and fair distribution of natural resources and environmental risks.
Okay, so to accomplish, someone could please read this.
To accomplish the above-mentioned objectives, to find ways to both meet the economic needs of people while preserving the capability of Earth to sustain human life, to achieve development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. A global system of governance and a collective security to protect the human race against political, social, economic, and environmental threats, dangers, and hazards is required.
Okay, and so also they conclude that, could someone read this one, please?
This global system of governance should be comprised of an international executive body operating under the Constitution for the Federation of Earth and a world parliament to devise international laws, among them international environmental laws based on international standards that can override international limitations, complemented by an international judiciary to adjudicate in conflicts and an international force to implement its decisions.
Okay. So although there are deep disagreements among the above organizations and individuals regarding the form and function of and procedures of this global system of governance, amid the confusion and acrimony of the debate, one can clearly discern the forging of a widely shared consensus regarding the import of environmental problems, the recognition of the interdependence of the social, economic, and environmental aspects of human life, and the need for a global collective action for structuring an integrated social, economic, and environmental paradigm is obvious from these publications and the papers and the conference agreements. This is a very progressive paradigm, a beautiful picture of future that these NGOs, civil societies, and humanitarian organizations, scientists, and thinkers are presenting at the beginning of the 21st century. So this is the consensus of the thinkers, environmentalists, scientists, biologists, and NGOs and humanitarian organizations. But I pause because we remember that we have seen this beautiful picture before. We have seen a similar picture painted in March 1936. This was 84 years ago, when there was no concern for environmentalism, no attention to depletion or just distribution of natural resources, no talk of human or environmental rights, no consciousness about the indivisibility of nature and connectedness of human world, when there were no global issues in the minds of the rulers and leaders of the world. That picture was painted in that magnificent letter of Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of Baha'i faith, to the American Baha'i community, called The Unfoldment of the World Civilization, in which Shoghi Effendi states, the unity of human race as envisaged by Baha'u'llah implies the establishment of a world commonwealth in which all nations, races, creeds, and classes are closely and permanently united. I'm asking for help again, if you friends can please read.
This Commonwealth must, as far as we can visualize it, consist of a world legislature whose members will, as the trustees of the whole of mankind, will enact such laws as shall be required to regulate the life, satisfy the needs, and adjust the relationships of all races and peoples.
This one.
A world executive backed by an international force will carry out the decisions arrived at and apply the laws enacted by this world legislator and will safeguard the organic unity of the whole Commonwealth.
Yes, and he says that a world tribunal will also adjudicate and deliver its compulsory and final verdict in all and any disputes that may arise between the various elements constituting the universal system. Also, he says that a mechanism of world intercommunication will be devised, embracing the whole planet, freed from national hindrances and restrictions, and functioning with marvelous swiftness and perfect regularity. Isn't that sounds like internet?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this, we remember that Shoaib Effendi wrote this letter to American Baha'i community March 3rd, 1936, when there was no microchips, no computers, no satellites, that he defined the internet so closely. And he says that the existence of this mechanism of world intercommunication is necessary for achieving the other goals that we have. And we see the effect of internet right now in really promoting social justice and environmental justice and other issues of national and international dimensions. He also says that a uniform and universal system of currency, and maybe someone can read this, I don't talk too much.
A uniform
Go ahead.
and universal system of currency, of weights and measures will simplify and facilitate intercourse and understanding among the nations and races of mankind.
Yeah, so if this unified system of weights and measures, which its adoption is inevitable, was already implemented, the first NASA lander mission of Mars to Mars would not fail. Remember that the first lander mission of the Mars was failed and crashed because the protective landing system, part of it was made by European countries and part of it by US, and Europeans use metric system and US we use English system. And the conversion of these two system of measurements caused a fault, and the system was not deployed on time and the lander crashed. So if we had this unified system, many of the problems would be prevented. He also mentions in the same letter, can somebody read this one?
The economic resources of the world will be organized. Its sources of raw materials will be tapped and fully utilized. Its markets will be coordinated and developed, and the distribution of its products will be equitably regulated.
Yes, and also he talks about a federal system will come to existence, ruling over the all federal international systems. He says that about this system, he says that a system in which Force is made the servant of justice, and whose life is sustained by its universal recognition of one God and by its allegiance to one common revelation. Such is the goal towards which humanity, impelled by unifying forces of life, is moving. This is a very significant and unprecedented statement in the history of religion and philosophical or political thought, because throughout the history, the justice has been trampled under the feet of the force. But here, the goal is to have force made servant of justice. And when that happens, considering the other issues that universally the life would be sustained by universal recognition of one God, because now we know that every person of conscious and intelligence will tell us that no matter what name we call God, there is only one God. And also there is one system of religion, which is the system of divine education of humanity by manifestations of God, that they have the same origin, and they are coming in a successive manner to educate humanity in a kind of progressive revelation. So he says that this system, he defined it and he described it in 1936, is a system that if it is applied in the world, that desired integrated paradigm will be existed, that will address all aspects of management and emerging global human society, where the concept of the world as a small urban or global village is considered, and the essential patterns of global governance and collective security and definitions of justice will be brought about through the operation of a divine energy that is released by revelation of Baha'u'llah. But this is for a time in future. What about the present time? So this beautiful paradigm is something that will be coming to existence for future. So what is about the present time? We saw that the environmental justice, tragedy of commons, and disturbance of the ecological system that are results of uncontrolled materialism. So the environmental injustice and tragedy of common and disturbance of ecological system that are results of uncontrolled materialism, greed, and short-sighted profiteering are the root cause of most of the environmental problems. And what the Baha'is need to do at this time and present condition, where the disunity and strife, the prejudice and the excessive materialism are rampant in our society. Again, Shohi Effendi states, can someone read this, please?
Go ahead.
Payujun, could you read that?
Yes, of course. Sorry. The gross materialism that engulfs the entire nation at the present hour, the attachment to worldly things that enshrouds the souls of men, the fear and anxieties that distract their minds, the pleasure and dissipations that fill their time, the prejudices and animosities that darken their outlook, the apathy and lethargy that paralyze their spiritual faculties.
This is a continuation of this.
These are among the formidable obstacles that stand in the path of every world-be warrior in the service of Baha'u'llah, obstacles which he must battle against and surmount in his crusade for the redemption of his own countrymen. Shoghi Effendi.
Yes. Can someone read this one?
Let us pray to God that in these days, a world encircling gloom, when the dark forces of nature, of hate, rebellion, anarchy, and reaction are threatening the very stability of human society, when the most precious fruits of civilization are undergoing severe and unparalleled tests, we may all realize
This is continuation.
more profoundly than ever that though but a mere handful amidst the seething masses of the world, we are in this day the chosen instruments of God's grace, that our mission is most urgent and vital to the fate of humanity, and fortified by these sentiments arise to achieve God's holy purpose for mankind. Shoghi Effendi.
We might think that we are a small and still relatively obscure community. How can we succeed in the redemption of our society? Shoghi Effendi, in one of his messages to America, states, can someone read this, please?
The generality of mankind is wholly unaware of the healing power with which this community has been endowed, nor can it as yet suspect the role which this same community is destined to play in its redemption. Fierce and manifold will be the assaults with which governments, races, classes, and religions, jealous of its rising prestige and fearful of its consolidating strength, will seek to silence its voice and sap its foundations.
This is continuation.
Unmoved by the relative obscurity that surrounds it at the present time, and undaunted by the forces that will be arrayed against it in the future, this community, I cannot but feel confident, will, no matter how afflictive the agonies of a travailing age, pursue its destiny, undeflected in its course, undeemed in its serenity, unyielding in its resolve, unshaken in its convictions.
It's interesting that Shoghi Effendi uses words that are so meaningful for all time. He says that in the agonies of a travailing age, this age that we are living in is a travailing age. And in the, can someone read this one?
In many letters and on many occasions, the beloved guardian warned that the disintegrating process will penetrate deeper and deeper into the very core of human society, and that much suffering is in store. Even when universal suffrage and all other rights presently sought by civil rights movements are fully attained,
Yeah. This is the continuation.
there still remains for the Baha'is the unaccomplished task of cleansing humanity by precept and example of every trace of racial prejudice. Nothing but the faith of God can accomplish this.
Okay, and he says that, again, can someone help read this?
In the midst of a civilization torn by strifes and enfeebled by materialism, the people of Baha are building a new world Let each believe in his inmost heart resolve not to be seduced by the ephemeral allurements of the society around him, nor to be drawn into its feuds and short-lived enthusiasms, but instead to transfer all he can from the old world to that new one, which is the vision of his longing and will be the fruits of his labors.
Yes. And he says that the obligation of American Baha'is towards humanity are great and inescapable. To the degree to which they discharge them, will they be blessed and protected, happy and satisfied. So we have this great obligation. So then he says that the Baha'is are the leaven of God, which must leaven the lump of their nation. In direct ratio of their success will be the protection vouchsafed not only to them, but to their country. These are the immutable laws of God, from which there is no escape, for unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. So we are held responsible and much is required from us. This allegory of leaven is the one that Christ used to teach his disciples how to share his message with the rest of mankind. We need to share the message and vision of Baha'u'llah with the rest of mankind, and especially with our fellow Americans. As Abdul Baha stated, they don't need to become Baha'is, but if they approve of the teachings and share the vision, they can become the chosen instruments of God's grace and work together with their Baha'i friends to establish unity and racial amity to resist the gross materialism that engulfs the entire nation, and to work for the cause of environmental justice. Thank you very much, friends, for listening to me, and I hope that it didn't make you tired. Thank you.
At this time, friends, we'd like to open the floor up for questions. You can type a question in the chat box or raise your hand in the participant box, or just unmute yourself and jump in. Are there any questions?
I have a question. Dr. Kourosh, I wonder about the vision of the Native peoples of the world and its alignment and potential for amplifying the message of Baha'u'llah with regards to environmental justice. Do you have comments on that possibility?
Yes, we have a lot of teachings in Baha'i faith, in Baha'i writings, about the preciousness of the nature, about the preservance of ecology, and about the also environmental justice, which is also a basis for social justice. And social justice is one of the goals that Baha'i faith wants to accomplish. And therefore, we can talk, as was mentioned in this example allegory of leaven, that leaven, when a small part of leaven is added to a big lump of dough, what happens is that the reaction on cellular basis starts. One particle at a moment. So we are like those cells in the lump of humanity, and we can one by one convey the message of Baha'u'llah and the teachings of Baha'i faith for social justice, for environment, and especially Shawi Effendi emphasized that our responsibility towards our nation and one at a time, one heart at a time. It became a cliche, but it is really valid to share these teachings, and they don't need to become a member of Baha'i faith in order to come and work with us and help with us to establish that concern for the ecology and for environment and for social justice in the world.
Okay, I believe that Sana Zekri has a question. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I was typing it, but it was taking a while to type. The entire premise, I feel that the entire premise of environmental justice and the environmentalists and also Sharia Effendi is that that individualism cannot be the rampant individualism cannot be the driving force or cannot be the underlying philosophy. But how do we actually, because I mean, this is like, you know, liberal philosophy is that the individual is the most important, inviolable, you know, concept. And that, you know, so how, especially when that influences how our existing political structures and political debates and discussions exist, how do we actually go about even either disproving this or responding to the criticisms that a world government or even a communal like an emphasis on communalism leads to governmental intrusion into individual rights?
Yes, the world is in motion and the society is in progress. Something that might be valid for some period of time will not be valid in future. The individualism, you know that as a result of the plan of manifest destiny in this country, when America was going through the development and frontiers were open, people were given the right to go and claim 160 acres of land for themselves, provided that they built one house in that 160 acres. And a kind of frontier mentality was developed. In frontier mentality, a frontier man was traveling towards west and he was hungry and a bison was there. He could kill that bison, eat just a small piece of 2 pounds, 1 pound, 2 pounds of the meat of the bison, and then leave the whole bison in the land to rot and be destroyed. At that time, the natural resources and the environment could take it. But can we do that thing right now in this situation? No. Right now, the global society of Earth, and spaceship Earth, is so interconnected that the individualism that also will end up in tragedy of commons, because the tragedy of commons is the manifestation of extreme individualism. The individual thinks that he can increase the number of his animals on this pasture in the common as much as he can, but in the process he will ruin the common. That's the same thing that individualism right now is a matter of past. It is not applicable applicable right now. Individualism now has to be controlled so that the action of one individual does not disturb the right of other individuals. So we have to work collectively and understand that environmental problems do not recognize any border or boundaries. As we saw the Fukushima that happened to the other side of the ocean, right now in the state of Washington, the radioactive pollution is tested to be higher than the protective level. So the world is so connected that Ebola in one corner of China will spread and take all of it. So in this situation, individualism doesn't work.
And Emmanuel, would you like to ask your question next?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question is as follows. I mean, all what we were saying in this discussion, I mean, it's very beautiful. I mean, it's well wished. And the problem is that what we see, which is going so bad with the environment, is because there are formidable financial forces behind all the destruction that we see. And how practically, and you were saying in that quote from Shoghi Effendi from the 1930s, he was saying we should really focus on the development of humankind spirituality to change all that. The problem is that how do we deal with all those formidable financial forces? How we can influence those financial forces spiritually? So instead of financing all that destruction, they finance really the rebuilding of a sane environment for everybody. That's my question.
Yes, it's a very valid question. And in social studies, we think that we will achieve that when the attitude of a great number of people is changed. That is the tragedy of commons, that the financial institutions and the powerful institutions and powerful forces want still to have that control of the commons, which is the air, the water, and the land, and to do whatever they want to do with it. But if the attitude of a great number of people is changed, then the change will come as a result of that. In social studies, it's been suggested that if we have 2% of the population agree with one protocol or one idea, it becomes significant to affect the total society. So the minimum is about 2%. So if we can reach at least 2% of humanity in general, we will see the changes starting to happen. Another thing that will force the change is, again, the tragedy of commons. Right now, we see that the fires in the West has attracted the attention of people, and hurricanes in the South and East has attracted the attention of the people, because the destruction, which is an economical problem, will eventually force those people who only think about economy to see that this is something that is not bearable anymore, and the change should come.
Okay, also in the chat box, someone has asked, can you talk more about environmental racism? I know this was the topic of your law school thesis.
Yes, it's a very vast subject and needs to be looked at from different social, economical, and spiritual aspects. And our schedule today really did not allow us. I can, if you send me your email, I will be able to send you some articles or some resources that you can read more about that.
Okay, and there's also a question, what are the implications of the efforts underway to control and exploit space by the ultra-rich? While they claim they will make internet available to everyone, are they not spending knowledge and resources that could be otherwise dedicated to solving our widespread problems, repeating the same actions of Earth's polluters and exploiters, creating another stratum of the ultra-rich and effectively increasing the gap between rich and poor?
Yeah, I think I am not qualified to go into that realm, you know, but I think that we see by now that the social media is becoming another common. So we are going to face another tragedy of common in social media as well.
Dr. Kourosh, what would you advise the young people of today when you spoke about Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the faith, had, I don't remember the date of it, but that in the 1930s he had spoken about a worldwide mechanism, which today we know to be the internet. And we know that this generation of youth are immersed in this process of technology. What would you say to young people today who equally to the adults have a responsibility to their future about becoming protagonists and owners of their learning in this process and how they can use this to make a difference? Because we also hear a great deal of information coming that resource is being exploited in many ways to our youth. And how could we elevate our youth in this understanding, and what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, in one of the quotations that we had from Shoghi Effendi, he said that he says that still remains for Baha'is the unaccomplished task of cleansing humanity by precept and example of every trace of racial prejudice, also as other problems. So our youth should be really instructed and taught about the requirements of the time, that because they are active in social media, and social media has become another common for us. So they have the responsibility of becoming very familiar with the forces that are acting in the media, and they can go and start the process of cleansing and bringing the attention of people to the importance of preservance of this common that we have, that is the social media, from becoming harmful instead of helpful. As I said, I am kind of not very advanced in social media, and it remains to our younger generations that are very familiar and proficient with the social media to really take this task and start being active to promote the healthy and useful media for all people.
Thank you.
Friends, at this time, it's almost 12 o'clock. So we will conclude our program with a closing prayer. Dr. Kourosh has graciously agreed to remain if anyone would like to stay online after the closing prayer and continue to talk and ask questions. Thank you.
When you love a member of your family, when you love a compatriot, let it be with the ray of infinite love. Let it be in God and for good. When you love a member of your family, when you love a compatriot, let it be with the ray of infinite love. Let it be in God and for good. Shed the light of boundless love on every human being you meet. Do not be content with words alone. No, let your heart fill with love for all who may cross your path. When you love a member of your family, when you love a compatriot, let it be with the ray of infinite love. Let it be in God and for good. When you love a member of your family, when you love a compatriot, let it be with the ray of infinite love. Let it be in God and for good. Shed the light of the boundless love on every human being you meet. Do not be content with words alone. No, let your heart burn with love for all who may cross your path.
We invite everyone to join us again next week at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time for another Sunday morning presentation. And at this time, please feel free to continue to interact with Dr. Kourosh if you would like to stay. Thank you.